Welcome to the do's and don'ts of Agile Game Dev for Beginners. My name is Jeremy Lam, and I'm the CEO and co-founder of Pixio Limited, a small casual mobile game studio based here in Hong Kong. Now, first off, I really want to thank Level 99 for this opportunity to speak alongside big industry names, and I think it's a really good opportunity for me. And I've been in the industry for almost 12 years now, and I just want to say that I'm not a master in any of the things I'm about to say, and I'm just starting to get the hang of it as well. So please don't consider me a master. I'm just another game dev here to share, what I love about the game industry. So before I start, a little bit more about myself. I studied economics when I was in university, and have somewhat of a mathematics or statistics background, so that's kind of what I tend to focus on. I was actually going to be an accountant before I saw a game company hiring a game analyst for their mobile games, and I got the job, and here I am 12 years later. So today I want to talk about agile development. So what is agile development? And I'm sure most of you have heard about this term, but for the uninitiated, it's basically improv for developers. The opposite of agile is waterfall, and in a waterfall development, you have a set amount of tasks you need to complete before completing the product or project. And when you're done, right? You ship the game, that's it. But in agile, shipping a game is actually really difficult because you have to first create what we call an MVP, a minimum viable product. You have to receive feedback on the product and improve the product accordingly. And sometimes it takes really long time to get your product to that benchmark that you want to get it to. And I understand a lot of you have heard about agile development before. You might have learned about it at school or in the companies you work for. But in reality, I see a lot of small teams still making a lot of the following mistakes I'm going to talk about in their own development cycles. And what I think is a lot of these issues actually stem from human psychology, and that's why I think that it's really natural to make these mistakes. And from my own experience and observation, we will all make these mistakes as devs when we start being a game developer. So first off, you really have to understand what prototypes are actually for. Now, a long time ago, when I first started a project, I would just blindly start a prototype, right? What is a prototype? It must be the bare bones version of the game, right? So you set out to do it because the word prototype sounds really cool and everything else is making a prototype. That is not what prototypes are for, and I found out the hard way. Building a prototype blindly actually achieves nothing. How do you not build it blindly, though? When I thought about this problem, I actually thought about what is a game producer's or game designer's most important job. Their most important job is to find the game's competitive edge. And the prototype is your tool to not only find that edge, but to get your team on the same page and to explain to them why it's fun and why it will stand out from the crowd. Some people will ask, it's going to take a lot more than a prototype to show my game's competitive edge. There's actually two answers to this. Either your prototype needs to be bigger, include more features, or what you can consider important for your prototype actually needs to be reduced. And it is often the latter. But this is a whole other topic worthy of its own talk. Anyways, to sum up, your prototype is there to answer specific questions about your game and to prove as much as possible that your game is fun to the team. The next thing is you have to be very aware of what MVP stands for. Now, everybody is telling everybody that you need to build an MVP, but um, more often than not, they kind of miss one of these things. Um, what happens is teams will lose sight of one or more of these things, and sometimes they would just throw minimal out the window. They think they're minimal, but they're not. And when I talk to those teams, one commonality is that they think everything is important. Every single feature that they're putting in is critical and is of the same importance, and there's no weighting amongst these individual features. And an experienced team, on the other hand, can tell me what they think are more important and will be able to list out the features in order of importance. Now, they might not be completely correct. I mean, no one is. But at least they'll have some idea of what they are. Other times, some teams will forget that they need to create something viable. If a team just wants to clone a game, then the MVP is already done. It is the game that you're trying to clone. So making a minimal version of the already existing game doesn't really answer any question or solve any pain points. If the game is not competitive, then it's not viable. I'll touch more on this subject later. Lastly, remember you're creating a product, and a product needs to be consumable by the consumer and satisfy a need. Ask yourself what need you are satisfying before you create an MVP. So the third thing, do test your MVPs as early as viable. Now, so like I said, prototypes are more for in-house consumption, may need to solidify the vision of the game and get everyone on the same page. But as for MVPs, you really want to put them in the hand of real users and at a large enough volume, roughly 1,000 to 2,000 players per version. Now, if you want to test out your game, you'll need a tutorial. And a lot of teams will put off doing the tutorial because they want to try to do it as late as possible, often for the reason being they haven't nailed down all the features yet. Hence, it is beneficial to really lock down the early game experience and create a tutorial around that experience and then release it. More often than not, you'll find out that there's a lot of issues with your design way before you add any additional features or content. The reason new teams don't want to release early is that, on one side, they have this huge hope for the game, thinking that the game is going to be awesome and it's nowhere close to the current state. On the other hand, they fear that the results of the game will be, devastating to them. It's crippling, right? And putting the game out is to basically look yourself in the mirror, and it's very important to do that as soon as possible so you don't waste time on unnecessary tasks. So when you're testing a game, you're not really testing the game, you're testing a hypothesis. There are a million things you need to do for a game, many decisions to make, assets to build, codes to write, what should you do next? That is a very important distinction between waterfall and agile. In waterfall, you always know what you need to do next, whereas in agile, you need to ask critical questions before deciding on what your next tasks are. Let's consider the following scenario. You release your MVP out into the wild, and you received gut-wrenching data and feedback. 20% day one retention, just absolutely horrendous. And the morale is low. Everybody's feeling horrible. You feel horrible, or team feels horrible. But because you're a good dev, you pick yourself back up, walk it off, and continue on your journey. But what are you going to do next? What are you going to tell your team? Is it the graphics? Are there any bugs? Do the people hate the gameplay? Are there UX issues? There's simply too much that can cause a game to have that kind of data, and there's a lot that you can do. What we do is we immediately look at the early game funnels and try to identify all the drop-offs. Now, when we're identifying the drop-offs, we will build a list of hypotheses on why people leave the game at that point. What are the reasons? Is it crashing? Do they not understand what to do next? Is it boring? Are there anything in the game offending them? There's going to be a million reasons on why people are leaving the game. But the important thing is to list them out one by one and to work on them one by one. And as you work on these and do additional testing on these things, you would learn which one of these hypotheses are important and which of them have no impact on your game. And as you go through this process, you will slowly build up your experience for game development. And by the time you get to your next game, you already know what kind of hypotheses are more impactful and what hypotheses are more less impactful, or you probably don't even have to do. Next thing is, don't be fixated on a certain aspect of the game. Now, I am the biggest culprit when it comes to fixation. Since I'm a game designer, whenever I see a bad performance in a game, I will immediately think it's design related. What did I do wrong? And most of the time, it's probably me. But sometimes it's not about the game design. Sometimes it's about something else, and here's where the collective experience of the team, comes into play. When you've vastly changed your game designs multiple times, you've tried the same feature multiple times with different flavors and different mechanics, and nothing changes in the metrics, you really need to take a step back and consider other avenues. For mobile game developers, check your Google Play metrics. Are you crashing on certain devices? Is certain Android versions? Are some of your libraries that you use causing any issues with the game or with Unity? Other problems could be when you acquire test users for your game. What ad creatives are you using? Are they misleading? Are they not giving you the correct type of users? Is the theme and the gameplay of your game not vibing well? For example, you make a game about tending to your garden, but it's actually a hardcore PvP game. How does your game work under slow internet connections? What about high ping? Where are your users from? All these issues could cause your game to underperform, and I'm only scratching the surface here. So the more games you make, the more of these things you'll encounter, and you can definitely bet on this industry throwing more and more problems at you. The last thing is, don't fixate on agile development alone. Now, you can totally overdo on agile development. This actually goes back to understanding what an MVP is. The team might take the word minimum too far and be trapped in the development hell because they're always testing a subpar product. They're changing so much in the game, but the game is never competitive, is never viable. Sometimes your game just needs a longer development time to actualize something better and to show the users something completely different. As situations like these, a waterfall development is actually better for your team, at least for this stretch of the development. It's things like polish, optimizations, balancing, putting in little surprises here and there. These things add up and they take a lot of time. But how does one know when it's time for waterfall and when is it time for agile? It really comes down to how the team understands their audience and their competitors. And this is another big difference I see between experienced teams and new teams. An experienced team keeps a hand on the pulse of the competition. They understand what everybody else is doing. They know the best ways to do a certain feature. And when you understand all that, you understand the level of quality that you need to at least achieve for a game to be somewhat competitive. So before you get to that point, any testing is kind of irrelevant. And for your game to really stand out, a certain quality is definitely required. And when some teams take the word minimum too far, they tend to lose sight of that. And that's it for my talk. Thank you all for listening. My name is Jeremy Lam, and you can find me at my email, or you can visit our website and check out our games. Thank you very much.